or two songs? Like, you're going to bring this guy in? It's just,
and really, who's going to want to hear it?
It's kind of a funny scenario. So, anyway, getting back to the Eddie Trunk interview, when he talked about moving forward with Van Halen without Eddie. Oh, Sammy shut that down right away. He says, there's never going to be a Van Halen without Eddie. Come on, there's no such thing. I wouldn't even consider it. A tribute show, a one-off for the fans, for charity? Absolutely. With some great guest guitar players. But without Eddie, there's no Van Halen, and that's all there is to it. When they asked him about Alex, he said that he has no idea what's going on with Alex, but he has reached out to him multiple times. He says he's called him at multiple points right when it happened, a week after, a couple weeks after, but he's gotten no response. He says, obviously he's grieving. Alex has played his whole life with his brother. I can't imagine what he would want to do going forward. I would imagine he's in deep thought right now, and my love goes out to him. So, and when he talked about Wolf, he said, I can't believe how grown up this kid is. He jumped right into the big time. He's a talented little guy. And when the COVID crap is over, I'd like Wolfie to do some shows with the Circle. I'm in full support of Wolfie. Now, when he addressed the vaults, Eddie Trunk really dug in there on Sam. He gave it to him good.
Surprising, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So he said to Sam, hey, listen, how much is left over from your era? And Sam was very clear on the whole thing. He says, you know what? We had a little extra. We did a little bit. I know exactly which songs they are. He says there are 4 songs from my era that didn't make the albums. But he says, I'm sure Ed had a ton of music with him and Al jamming on it. He says, but we've never over-recorded because we were always in a hurry to get back on the road. So when Ed asked him specifically, he says there are 2 songs from Fuck and 1 extra song from the Best of Both Worlds sessions. Now, I don't think he's counting the 5150 song that they had, I Want Some Action. That's definitely left over. Between Us Two, which is completely finished from the Twister soundtrack. And then he also has, of course, Crossing Over, which is, I guess that would be considered, it's released. So, but I don't know.
No, I don't think that counts because that's released.
Yeah, I know, but you could certainly include it in a package if you were going to do one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He says the songs that didn't make the records the first time wouldn't make it a second time. They weren't up to par. What made the record was the good stuff. But what he did say, I loved him for saying this. This was great. He says the coolest thing in that 5150 vault is the day I walked in the studio to jam with Van Halen in 1985. We recorded all that stuff, including rough versions of Good Enough and Summer Nights, and a slow 12-bar blues jam. He says there's hours of that, and I would love to hear it because it's probably so raw. And he says Wolf has a little gold mine on his hands there, and he also hinted I might have to write a second book. Oh, man. So what do you make of that?
A second book? I
think he could do a whole book on his time in Van Halen. What about that?
Well, I think he wrote a lot about that in his first book already.
He did, but let's get...
maybe his book. He'll write another book because now Ed's not around to defend himself. So.
Well, he didn't hold back the first time.
Sorry, I know that's wrong. But,
I know.
I know, but I don't know Sam, but as a fan, I'm very suspect. So,
so listen to this.
Dave, am I really?
No, we know. So listen to this. So I also pieced a couple of things together. So after Eddie Trunk interviewed Sam, Eddie makes these little comments on the air, and if you listen closely and you bead this stuff together, sometimes he leaks stuff out without even knowing. Apparently, there's a new Sammy album coming our way. Now, this is surprising. So, Eddie said he got on the phone with Sammy's manager, and Sammy's manager said to him, hey, did he talk about the new album? Ed goes, new album? No. What are you talking about? And his manager's like, oh, man, I can't believe he didn't mention it. So then I was like, oh, shit, he's got a new album out? So I'm like, what could this possibly be, right? So just the other day, Ed leaked it out that apparently he has a quarantine album of all the Circle tracks from the sessions. What were they called? The lockdown sessions?
Yeah, and I believe, like we were saying, he should put those out.
I think he's listening to Dave and Dave Unchained.
Well, I'm sure we weren't the only ones saying that, but yes, I think maybe he is.
I think that's right. I think, hello, Sam, how are you, buddy? You better get writing that second book before Dave chops your head off. So Sammy Hagar and The Circle are coming out with a new album called Lockdown 2020, and it's being released on January 8th, and it is a compilation of all their different lockdown sessions through the pandemic. And the track listing is as such: Funky Feng Shui, Won't Get Fooled Again, Good Enough, Three Little Birds, Whole Lotta Rosie, For What It's Worth, Keep a Knockin', Right Now, Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do, Sympathy for the Human, and a cover of David Bowie's Heroes. A quote from Sam: "When we were on tour, these are the songs we've been jamming backstage for years. Before we go on stage, we'd warm up for about an hour playing everything from James Brown and AC/DC to the Bee Gees, The Who, and Hank Williams. You name it. So until we can get back to our live shows, these lockdown sessions are a great way to keep the band close and our chops up." That's from Sam, and if you want to get a CD copy of it, you can go to mailboatrecords.com. Unbelievable. Interesting. So, speaking of Van Halen lead singers, David Lee Roth, well, he didn't like us so much of what Sam had to say. But Dave responded in his own Dave way. So does he come out on the mic and curse Sam out? Nope, he doesn't do that. So what Dave did was, he did one of his daily catastrophes, which is his cartoon series he's been doing during the pandemic, right? And he tweeted it out with an intricate drawing styled in the form of a newspaper, and the front page says, "Concrete flowers for Sam. Sam the man not only will be giving his life for rock and roll, but plans to be buried in his recent acquired jet. Red Rocker refuses to fly 55 in the afterlife. Soggy kudos to the bottom's favorite front guy for planning ahead." So Dave is such a twisted bastard. So he was ribbing him there. Obviously, he wasn't taken so nice to be calling not user-friendly very clearly on the Eddie Trunk Show. So
you think that was it?
What else was it? I mean, he came right out and said, hey, look, Dave's not user-friendly. I mean, that's,
No, I know Sam came out right there.
That's what I mean.
But do you think that's why Dave responded?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
Because the timing was it was right after, so.
Yeah, but doesn't it take Dave a while to draw those things?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the writing, maybe he added the writing. You know what I mean? Like, it takes him a while, but it was still like a week or two afterwards. I mean, he could have easily done it.
I don't know. I don't know. Well, I still feel like I need Cliff Notes to interpret what the heck he's talking about. Anyway.
The subtext is unbelievable. So Sammy's so bold, man. These two, I swear to God,
I know where you're going with this.
These two are never going to stop. So Sammy goes, "I want to thank my old buddy Dave for considering me interesting enough to be the subject of his fine art hobby." He wrote this on Instagram. I know. Oh, boy. So,
Dave read that 10 times.
Oh, God. God knows what he's painting right now.
Right.
It's going to be a headstone with Red Rocker on it. The funny thing is, then Hagar commented on Roth's Instagram, but he says, "Dave, my old buddy, I would love to buy this piece of fine art. Is it for sale? How much? Where can I see it in person?" Oh, so now he's acting like Mr. Big Bucks. Like, let me throw some money away for your little drawing over there.
Well, he's trying to take the high road, but there's a lot of sarcasm in the high road.
Oh, this is these two. And then a fan complimented him on responding positively, and Hagar said, "That's exactly why I posted it. I think it's cool. I think it's actually good. I have no problem with Dave." Then another Instagrammer suggested that Roth Roth's cartoon was a response to his comments on Trunk, and he says, but Hagar disagreed. He goes, I didn't knock him. I was saying that he's a tough guy to work with, and believe me, that's the truth. But he couldn't have painted it that fast. This is too good. There's absolutely no angst from me. I love it. So, I mean, this is going to be a chess match that just never ends, these two. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's amazing. They're like in their 60s and 70s and still like bickering back and forth like children. Oh,
please. They're like infants. It's unbelievable. So they did an article on Roth in Variety, which is a big entertainment publication, and Mr. Richard Beanstalk wrote the story. Now, in the story, a couple things came out, okay, which is important to note. Now, let me tell you, Dave is one complicated guy to read. You know, we've been talking about this Dave album that everybody forgot about, but it's like, by the way, remember, it's coming, and they released Somewhere Over the Rainbow Bar and Grill. We talked about that on the last episode, right? So, when they asked about what's going on, like it's going to be an album, he says, my intention was to release the rest of the songs Drake style, single by single, Roth says. That affords a great focus on the individualized tracks, most of which get lost in the shuffle when you release a whole album. Doesn't matter if you're McCartney or Metallica. You put out 12 or 14 songs and they're just engineered as primates go. I like this one and that one. Now what's for dinner? So he's acting like, I guess the concept of an album is no longer he doesn't think it works. So it's like, okay, so I guess that's out the window. His song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow Bar and Grill, is got 500,000 YouTube views. And he says, for someone in my position at this point in my career, that's a knockout over the park. But he also said, regarding his Van Halen brothers, he says, I won the Super Bowl 7 times over with the 4 Horsemen. Ain't nothing gonna knock that mountain down. Which I thought was an interesting comment. When they talked about the song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow Bar and Grill, being dedicated to Eddie, it was kind of like, you know, we all were kind of like, oh, how's that dedicated to Eddie? Like, you know, obviously he wrote that years ago. Oh, yeah,
it was a total afterthought.
Yeah, it was kind of an afterthought. So he said on the cover art, hey, Ed, I'm going to miss you. See you on the other side.
And it was obviously added at the last minute.
Yes, and only Dave could spin gold out of this. What a piece of work this guy is. So he said it's fitting to acknowledge the song itself, although it was written and recorded prior to Van Halen's death, that it was a tribute to a shared history. It said, this is a quote from Dave, I don't usually write autobiographically, but this was a specific effort to replicate a time and place. And he keeps pointing to this lyric where he says the smell of fresh sawdust on the floor from the dives that Van Halen gigs would be at in the band's early days. And he says it triggered volumes of memory. That one thing, you know? He says, and so I thought, if it occurred for Ed, which it did not, that everybody was going to get up and tell a story, I guess like at a memorial, then it got to my turn, I would start with the smell of fresh sawdust on the floor, and I'd go from there. And then he said, that's the beginning of the story, at least for me, because that's everywhere we played, the smell of fresh sawdust on the floor. I mean, that's quite a line to draw, but okay.
I think the song Autobiography.
No, it totally is. Yeah, totally, yeah.
Right, it is, but is it explicitly an Ed tribute song? No.
No, yeah.
I think Dave was, coming out with this thing anyway, and he was like, well, I think we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I mean, it was still nice that he thought of Ed and dedicated the song to him. So don't get me wrong, the sentiment behind it is genuine. But it was never intended to be a Ed Van Halen tribute song.
Right. And look, it's nice that he did it. But at the same time, it's not like the whole song is about Ed or something, So that's a little weird.
No.
So now, Billy Corrigan from the Smashing Pumpkins, who has a new album, Sear, out, which is really good, by the way. He was on Howard Stern's show, and Howard, who's obsessed with Van Halen, said to Billy, I want to talk to you about the time you interviewed Eddie Van Halen for Guitar World magazine. We talked about this a while ago, but he said that he wanted to introduce Eddie to a generation of alternative kids. He said the interview was supposed to be an hour, and it went 4.5 hours. He showed him some unreleased Van Halen music, and He loved it because he's a huge, huge Van Halen fan. He says it was a 10 out of 10 experience in my life. He goes, I got to know him a little bit afterwards, and he was always super gracious. He even came out to one of our shows. It doesn't get any better than that. He was the best of the best. Now, the interesting thing, he was talking about Ed's incredible talent. He said he was so